Okay, so happy Friday, everybody. This is lecture 14. Next week will be the last formal week of the class, and I am feverishly working to set up the dates. Hopefully, Heather and I will come to a consensus next week about when and exactly where we'll have the conference out in San Antonio. But next week will be kind of the last week, and as we said last time, the technical techniques are pretty much past us. There's a little bit of optimization that we're going to do next week, and hopefully the technical techniques that we'll talk about today, FMEA and decision making via a program called the Decision Guru. Those are the sort of technical techniques that a lot of the stuff happens in the background. So I think it's kind of downhill in terms of the difficult effort from here, and hopefully it'll be a fun experience learning and sharing about our projects down in San Antonio too. I'm really looking forward to that. Okay. So here's the agenda for today. First of all, I want to take a little bit of time talking about assignment number 5 and lecture number 5, or lecture number 13, if you had any questions on that. The first question I want to ask is, I want to make sure everyone at BHS has gotten the assignment because I've had trouble getting emails through to you. I sent a follow-up to everybody that said, here's where it is on the platform if you didn't get it in the email. And if you got it via the platform, great. If you still haven't gotten it, please send me an alternate email address or something like that I can get the file to you. It's not that big, so I'm not sure why my emails aren't getting through. They were at first. But I heard from Patrick. I know Patrick did not get it. I didn't hear from anybody else.
I haven't gotten it either, Mark. I just did a search on my email.
Okay. Did you get the follow-up email that I sent?
I got one Monday saying the lectures are posted 11 and 12 and supplementary videos. Okay.
Yeah, no, this would have been last, yeah, it would have been, maybe it would have been on Monday. I think it was on Monday that I sent it out. I know, Patrick, you got the second email. So apparently my emails aren't getting through to anybody. So
nope, I didn't get that. I didn't get it.
Yeah, so maybe you'll have to look in your junk files or spam files, and somehow my stuff is getting in there. My email address is being flagged or something. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's a letter that I put in one of my subject lines, or who knows what. They've been pretty ordinary as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I had no problems before, but I didn't.
Okay.
It's not in my junk either.
Yeah, and if you receive those other emails, it's really surprising that you didn't receive the other one that was saying, hey, did you get the assignment? So the assignment is there. It's due on Thursday of next week.
And I can find it.
You can find it on the platform. I'm going to navigate to that, but seeing that Brad and John are not here, and I didn't hear from them either, I need to find a way that we can communicate. Email's not working. So we'll have to figure out some way. However, let me. I'll tell you what. I'm going to show you everybody where to get to the assignment. Patrick, were you able to get it off of the site? Maybe Patrick is out for a moment. All right, I'm going to show you how to get it off of the site.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Hey, Patrick, were you able to get it off of the site?
I haven't tried yet, but I know where it is.
Okay. All right, so just to show everybody how to do it, and hopefully you can see my screen, you have to sign in, and you're all registered. So if you forgot your password, just click on Forgot Password, and you'll get a password sent to you. But you sign in, and when you sign in, we're going to be using this a little bit later today, and part of the assignment is for you to be doing that, is for you to use something called Decision Guru. So should be getting practice on this anyway. And on the left-hand side is the navigation pane. I'm just going to open that up a little bit more so you can see the folders. And in yours is going to look a little bit different, but you're going to have My Solutions. It's going to look different from mine. It's going to be yours. And then underneath that, there's Executive Black Belt. If you click on that folder, I have uploaded the EBB and EGB assignments number 5. So you just have to click on Open and then save it to your computer. And that should work just fine. Okay, so please let me know when you do have it, that you've got it. I don't want you losing some other time. Second thing is there's a number of people who have not turned in assignment number 4. You need to do that. Just a reminder. Okay, so I guess I'll kind of open with that. What questions do you have? I want to make sure that everybody at least has the assignment, so you have a fighting chance to answer it. Okay, so beyond that, now let's reorient ourselves. So assignment 4 was the regression, multiple regression. Most of that is optional for the green belts, so you don't have to do that. There's other things that you do have to do. And then assignment number 5 is design experiments, and again what we're doing this week, which is decision making, and that. Now most of the design of experiments, again, for green belts is optional. So you don't have to do that. Okay. However, having said all of that, what questions does anybody have on assignment 5, which is largely around design of experiments, as I said, and teams, behavioral techniques, and what questions do you have on lecture 13, which was covering behavioral techniques? No questions. Okay. Okay. Well, let's get started then. So we're going to pick up on we're in week 7, and we're going to pick up roughly on the section that begins on 25, which is teams and teamwork. And you'll see in there that basically there's a little exercise that you're going to be doing, a couple of those things, and that's basically is all that's in this section. So I really just want to kind of open it up to people. One of the things that I want to talk about is that obviously in Lean Six Sigma, that's how things work. They work with a functional team, usually a tactical team that's on the size of, say, 5 people, max 10, minimum of, say, 2 or 3, and it's a team that forms to solve a specific problem. But more and more these days, I mean, businesses are relying less on sort of organizational structure and more on a team-based environment to be able to get things done. So I would pose to you, the questions of, let's just start out by, why don't we just take out the old whiteboard, and we'll ask the question, let's see, why don't we just start out with the question, where are teams used? Where and why and how are teams used in your business? So let's start out with that. Think of just a, oh, I didn't want to cross them off. Just wanted to underline it. There we go. Okay. So take 15 seconds and just think about, what are some places where you use teams to do anything that you can think of, like to use it to solve a problem, which problem, so forth. Okay, so let's kind of go around the room. So Shani, are you on?
Yes, I am.
All right, Shani. Shani, where are teams used in your business at Connecticut? What are one or more examples that you wrote down?
They're used in processes where the expertise is not held by one person, so people have to work collaboratively because each person has some piece of the process that they own.
Excellent. Okay, so what would be an example of that where you have a specific team that would be dedicated to doing something?
The clinical review team, that's made up of the nurses who do the medical decisions, but then you have the UMAs who enter all of the information for them, then the doctor who has to sometimes intervene on certain cases, supervisor who makes it all happen and makes sure that everybody's doing their pieces.
Okay, great. All right. Patrick, how about you?
Well, hers is almost identical to what I was going to say. There you have a lot of, it's obviously the varying expertise with clinical, non-clinical. We have a lot of those types of teams, but I'll go with another one. We've created a Boy Scout troop with the Baptist team, and so we have a group of former scouts and trying to figure out the best things to show them within the Baptist healthcare system.
Okay, so I guess I'm not quite clear on what it is that they do.
We created a Boy Scout troop essentially.
I'm sorry?
We created a Boy Scout troop.
Yeah.
And so essentially what we've done is it's for older scouts who maybe want to go into the healthcare field. So the group has come together and has planned basically month to month what they're going to be seeing and experiencing in the hospitals, everything from the helicopter air life, to watching OR and using the robot and that type of thing.
Got it. So it's really Boy Scouts.
It's really Boy Scouts.
Okay, got it. I thought it was you called them the Boy Scouts.
No, they are really Boy Scouts.
Got it. Okay, and it's specific to healthcare.
Yep.
Okay, got it. All right, and Tracy, how about you? What's an example that you've got? Tracy, are you there? Okay. Well, I guess we've more or less got it then. All right. There's lots of different places where teams are used and differences of how. So they can be used to, say, orient people, like in the Boy Scout troop, right? Or they can be used to solve very specific problems on an ongoing basis, or they can be used in a project, right? So we have a lot of project teams in Lean Six Sigma, and that's kind of how they all work. So now let's go instead to saying at least, what are some ways, what are some characteristics, let's just put it this way, so what are some characteristics of good teams? So take another, say, 15 seconds and say, let's maybe brainstorm a number of different characteristics that when you say, here's a high-performing team or a good team, what are the characteristics that we want them to have? So take another 15 seconds and brainstorm that. Write it down if you can. Don't just do it in your brain, because if you write it down, then it's amazing what happens in your brain when you write it down. You remember so much better. Okay, so why don't we start out, and I guess this time I'll start out with Tracy, if you're there. Tracy? Okay. Let me move to Patrick then. Patrick, what's a character?
They have the appropriate competencies.
Appropriate competent. Oops, see if I can. I'm not very competent speller here. Appropriate competency. I'm just gonna short circuit that by saying they're competent. How about that? And we understand kind of what that means. They have the right competencies. I don't have the competencies spelled. Okay. How about you, Shani?
They communicate effectively.
Communicate effectively. Okay. All right. I'll throw out something here. They're
Motivated.
They're motivated. Okay, great. That's a good one. They're motivated to do what they want. And I can see how we're going here, and I actually like that. You're stealing my thunder there, Patrick, which is good. There's a couple of other things I want to list. They challenge each other effectively. Mm-hmm. How about another one, Shani?
Oh shoot, I had one and then I just lost it. It was along the motivated. Oh, that they all focused on similar goals.
Oops. I want to just put a question mark here.
Mark, did you hear me?
I did, yeah. I'm
okay,
trying
sorry.
to write it down.
A little nervous that our phone was messing up. Okay.
On similar, and I'm writing same, question mark, goal.
Yeah, well, I think it should be the same, but each person might have some slightly different goals in order to reach that ultimate team goal. Like
Right.
turnaround time for an authorization, but each has their own piece that they need to meet in order to reach that.
Right. Right. Okay. Good. Let's see. What other ones do we want to add here?
Is there anything as far as whether it's your sponsor at some level of authority or ability to actually change the process once you, or whatever you're trying to get to?
Yeah, that's an interesting, I think, it's good to write down. They have the authority.
Or at least a direct line to the authority, maybe with your sponsor or whatever.
What's a word that people use as a buzzword there is empowerment, right? So they're empowered.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
It does.
Okay, they're empowered. Okay, and there's lots of other things. I want to add one more thing here to the goals, and let's kind of walk through. I think we understand kind of what competency means, but let's talk a little bit about that. So, Patrick, what did you mean by comp when you said they have the appropriate competencies?
I just think that what Shani was talking about earlier, when you bring a team together, having the people who are the subject matter experts. So, depending on whatever your goals or the purpose of the team, making sure that the appropriate people there with the correct competencies.
Yeah, yeah, and that's for sure. That's one part. But I would posit also there's a couple of other competencies that we want people to bring to the table in the team. The second is what I'm going to call economic literacy, and I didn't make that term up, but that term comes from a place. The reason why I wanted to say, why I said that, Patrick, you're stealing my thunder, is I think DCOM, which we learned in the first or second week, is an excellent way to do a weather check on your team to see if they have the right, if this team has the right direction, the right competencies, the right empowerment, and the right motivation or opportunity, and the right motivation to be able to get things. And competency in here is usually three prongs. It's usually, do we have the right technical skills? That is, if we're doing, like you say, a nursing project, do we have nurses on the team, or at least people who understand nursing? That's super important. And by the way, for somebody who's who occasionally needs a lesson in humility, like me, this was an eye-opener when I started Six Sigma. And I think, Patrick, you and I talked a little bit about this, that you talked about how when you come into a business, you need people to help you solve the problem because you don't necessarily bring the competency with you in a specific area. Do you remember that conversation we had?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, it really is vital for us to be able to develop our asking skills and to really do an assessment early on. Do we have the right skills for this? And to be vocal about it, going back to the sponsor when we don't. The second thing is economic literacy, and not everybody in the team will have this, but you have to have it. And what that means is you have to be able to say, here's why this project is important in terms of why our business stays afloat, right? Now, I think both of us work in, everybody here works in a profit-based industry or a company. Baptist is a for-profit hospital, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And Connecticut doesn't do it for just altruism either. So it's important for us to have that value proposition in the back of our mind. And that's why, for example, we write a business case in our charter. A business case narrative is something that we constantly have to work on to get it to be resonant with the project sponsor and other stakeholders. And eventually that should lead into a spreadsheet model where you're talking about dollars and cents. But the first step is and the absolutely vital step is to be able to make that connection to for yourself and for your team. The more your team can understand that, the better. And the third part is kind of interpersonal or managerial. So, for example, and this kind of bleeds into some of these other things. For example, the one that I brought up here, where challenge each other effectively. Have you ever been on a team where they're just so dysfunctional because they just disagree with each other? I guess that's a question. I know I have. Has anybody ever experienced groupthink? Does anybody know what groupthink is?
Where everybody has the same opinion and same thoughts.
Everybody has the same opinion and same thoughts, right? And groupthink is horrendous when teams go through a phase where we're all thinking the same way all the time, and there's no challenge. The former, the late Christopher Hitchens used to talk about that. There's a saying that says this conversation is generating more heat than light, and his retort was to say, well, in the universe there is no such process that I know of, physical process where light is generated that doesn't require heat. So I think that's kind of an interesting point, is to say you have to have some heated discussion, some disagreement, some friction in order to create something of some insight. And it's an interesting thought anyway. On the other hand, certainly we've experienced teams where there's a conflict between one or more of the people that are on the team, and it causes all sorts of problems as well. I mean, a great example of this is Congress, right? So our current Congress, they're supposed to be playing on the same team. And most of the time I think we would agree that it doesn't really feel that way, especially today, where I think many people are beginning to wonder whether or not anybody can have enough power to get anything done, whether it's the right or the left or the Tea Party movement or the Occupy movement. Nobody can get to be powerful enough to move things. All right, and that bleeds into the communicate effectively and all that. So I guess maybe instead of just saying nodding our heads, we could probably get a better list than this. But now I want to say, I want you to say in the DMAIC process, and you can cheat and you can pull out your navigators if you want, but in the DMAIC process, what tools and let's just say process steps or procedures enforce or help ensure good team behavior, right? So what are the tools and procedures that help ensure that what we do proceeds smoothly in terms of what we do as a team? So I'd like you to brainstorm that for maybe 15 seconds. I was going to say 15 minutes. How about 15 seconds? And then we'll talk a little bit about that. And hello, Sue. Welcome. I think I heard Sue. Right. Okay, let's go around the room again and let's just write down a few dot points, as many as we can on these. So let me start with Sue. So what is a tool or procedure that helps ensure that we have a smooth and a functioning team, high-functioning team?
I know at the beginning of the project we often want to go over the ground rules. You know, there's no judgment zone, everybody's opinions are respected, everybody should participate, etc., etc.
Now, do you mean in the beginning of a project, or you mean in the beginning of a, like at a kickoff meeting?
Yes, whenever I say project, I mean process improvement project, but yes, like a kickoff meeting.
Okay, got it. Okay, got it. Yeah, because there's a number of tools that you do that with too, like brainstorming, right?
You're stealing all of Shani's.
Okay, ground rules, right? Yeah. All right.
You want to set the right tone for the meeting.
Got it. Mm-hmm. Got it. Patrick, how about you?
I put the charter was very important.
The charter.
Basically, it defined what the purpose of the team is and kind of it defined the boundaries, I guess, with the scope portion of it.
Scope. Yeah, so let's dwell on that a little bit. I happen to think that the charter is probably the key document to making sure that a team gets going and does it effectively. But the purpose, the scope, roles very often, right? So that helps me understand why I'm here, why I'm going to come to the meetings, and so forth. The business narrative, right? There's a reason why we want to put the business narrative in the charter. And we want to have it in that document. It's so that when we write a problem statement, which is similar to a business narrative, but not exactly the same, problem or opportunity statement, but you can see how that's really important, right? If you have a team and you disagree on the business narrative, like for example, in your NPS project, Shani and Sue, if you feel that well, the reason why we're doing this project is to, or let's say the next phase of it, when you're actually looking at improving the NPS, if your thought is that, hey, we're going to improve the NPS to increase efficiency and to reduce administrative costs, and the sponsorship and the other stakeholders disagree with that, that's going to be a big disconnect. So it's important to take a little time about that and understand sort of why you're doing what you're doing, and vet that a little bit. All right, and that's kind of goes to here on the bottom one. See if I can get back where we say focused on the same or similar goals, and we also want those goals to be relevant and correct. We want them to be relevant goals. I've certainly worked on teams before where we were focused, but and maybe even effective at what we were trying to do, but we did something that was not all that big of a deal to the business. So as the project went on and on and on, we felt that we were being ignored, and that didn't make us feel good either. And it certainly didn't make us more effective. There's lots of things that are in our timeline is another one of those things. Very helpful. Okay. Shani, what's one thing, or what's one or a couple things that you mentioned?
Well, I got specific, like multi-voting, using silent voting. If you start to see that people aren't all sharing, those types of things. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of specific tools that we have in here, right? Like multi-voting that are, or affinity. Affinity is another good one, right? That's related to that, where you're doing some silence so that you ensure that lots of people participate. Excellent. So there's a lot of specific tools, and then there's a lot of sort of guiding tools along the process. For example, all of you should have a very solid communication plan now. That is, you know what you're supposed to communicate, when, and to whom. Very important, because, if you see that your sponsorship, for example, if you're supposed to communicate every Tuesday and sponsorship keeps ignoring that, well, that gives you a big red flag, and you know that there are issues with what's going on there. Or the opposite can certainly be there. That once a team starts working autonomously, that they can get a little bit off track. So that's one of my favorites is the communication plan, and I also love the Gantt chart, which is kind of the timeline right there. I love Gantt charts because they connect. I don't know whether it's two. I can't remember whether it's two T's, right? Yeah. They connect what we're doing to when we're going to do it, and help everybody see whether we're on time and progressing. Find them to be very effective communication tools. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit. So I think this is a reasonable good list. And what I would say is also I want to bullet out DCOM, right, which was a tool that we used in the first or second week. I would advise you guys to periodically with your own team internally do a DCOM check with everybody, and to make sure that you do have a solid charter, solid communication plan, and you guys can use the tools, right? I mean, you're getting to be able to use the tools effectively. A lot of them do actually help promote team behavior if you've got it. There was one other aspect I wanted to put in here as well, and it's not always true, but a lot of good teams like each other, at least to certain extents, for the duration of the project maybe, or for the duration of the existence of the team. And I think that's often a very good thing to have in mind. One of the things that a lot of companies make mistake with is they promote people to management that nobody likes or that people dislike. Very difficult to motivate a team if nobody likes you. All right. So hopefully you had a chance to read the Nut Island effect. Let me just take a quick poll. So I see that Tracy's on, but she hasn't responded, so I don't know whether she's on actively or not, or maybe she's got on the mute. But Patrick, Shani, and Sue, did you get a chance to read the Nut Island effect?
I have not yet.
I did, Mark. I did not.
Okay. All right. So Shani already knows this, but it is a well-written article. And Shani, what is the? I'll put you a little bit on the spot. So basically, what is the Nut Island effect about? When they're saying the Nut Island effect, what do they really mean?
Oh, they're talking about how a group can become isolated and go through stages where ultimately they become ineffective and can, you know, essentially cause a huge problem because they become isolated. They have the group think, it's them against the world, that kind of thing.
Right. So Nut Island effect is basically a description of how a great team or a good team eventually becomes a bad team and creates disasters, right?
Is that what statement?
So that's essentially what it is. That's the Nut Island effect. And the background is basically a study of a sewage treatment center called Nut Island, and it was near Quincy, Mass. It looks like Quincy, but it's Quincy for those in the know. Anyway, and that's essentially what happened to these guys. And basically, there's a number of different attributes that are in there. And he actually gives a bunch of stages, the person who did it. And as Shani correctly pointed out, that along one of those stages, which I think is maybe number 2 or 3, they become isolated and develop a us against world mentality. So just to kind of, in a nutshell, pardon the pun, that's kind of the progression. Is they started out with a mandate and developed a lot of camaraderie and became very effective early on. So the first stage is actually they are an effective team. And it's an interesting cycle, and it's one of the reasons why it's important to have a communication plan in place and that it continues periodically, even if you're doing well. So one of the things that we didn't mention with an effective team is an effective team is low cost primarily to its sponsors. Now what I mean by that is, and we should all strive to try and be this way as business people, we want to be fairly autonomous and low cost. So for example, Patrick and all of you actually on the call, I don't have to make a lot of entreaties to say, hey, did you make our call? Did you miss our call? I know that on Wednesday at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time, Patrick's going to call me, and I know that at 3:30, Shani and Sue are going to call me, unless I tell them to wait 10 minutes, please, and I'm being high cost there. So the more that we can be autonomous and be low cost, that's excellent. However, let's not take that for granted. So we want a low cost team. We want a team where we don't have to over communicate to get things done. But we want to make sure that we are communicating enough all the time. So what can sometimes happen is a team can become so effective that management stops asking. And that's what happened at Nut Island. So anyway, I want you to read the, I do want you to read it. As I said, it's a well-written article. It got into Harvard Business Review case study, so it can't just be a piece of junk. They're not going to accept that. So it's well worth reading. And see if you can get any learnings from it. It's in the assignment, so make sure you do that if you can. I think it's a fairly insightful article. So this is Management Ignores, because they're so low cost, they're so good that we don't even need to check on them anymore. Anyway, you know, kind of coming back, and maybe this is one of the reasons why Shani said a good team has to have effective communication. You know, the lessons really with Nut Island, I think, really evolve around communication. That's a trite answer, but that's kind of the first stage of the answer, is to say, yeah, it's really about communication, and then we have to move on from there and say specifically what. All right. Any other comments on how good teams become bad teams? Questions, comments? Okay. All right, great. So I'm going to move on now, and what I'd like to do is go to FMEA, and is to go to FMEA, and let me open up the week here. So now I don't want to waste everybody's time, but so we won't just necessarily go through slides. You can go through the slides, but I guess why don't we just kind of have more of a conversation if we can about it? I don't have to go through all the slides. There's an example in there. Let me see. Let me get to it firstly. 30, 32, 31. Okay. So first of all, let's just kind of set the stage for this. FMEA stands for something called Failure Modes and Effects Analysis. And even though that's almost a meaningless acronym to most people, what it's really about is assessing risk. So how many of you have used FMEA or some variant of it before? Just let me say yes if you have.
Yes, Sue and I have used it.
I haven't used it.
Oh, you didn't use it? You
No,
didn't
you
use our
didn't.
project? Okay,
Yeah.
so I've used it, Mark.
Okay. Patrick, have you used FMEA before?
No, I'm not trained on it yet, Mark.
Oh, you aren't trained on it. Okay. So we'll go through it then a little bit because Sue, I know that you have used it, but you've used a version that I actually kind of recommend. We did it in the quoting thing where we assessed the risks at the end.
I know, but you remember, Mark, Shani was on the project longer than me.
Oh, that's right.
She did it. I did not. I was gone by then.
That's right. All right. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. So anyway, let's go quickly through it then, and I think you'll get it pretty quickly. It's essentially a grid technique, and what it's about is essentially identifying the risk or failure of different places in a process or in a product. Those are the two classic FMEAs, and to balance and weigh those risks. That's what it's about. So let's just kind of, as we do kind of walk through this, there's lots of different places in a DMAIC process where you can use an FMEA. You can use it to help generate potential causes, or it can be used there, or to verify actionable causes. Most likely it's going to be used to help select solutions. So if mitigating risk is a big thing, that's going to be, using an FMEA can be helpful. And also, it's going to be very helpful in developing your control plan. So a lot of times people put an FMEA and how to continue to keep it in a process in a control plan so that risks are held in check, or at the very least, they're kept on the radar. I should say that, yeah, I've got it here on selecting solutions because sometimes we'll select solutions that are fixes, but the fixes could be risky in and of themselves. So it's good to go in with your eyes open, and that's what this is. That's what this is really all about. Okay, we already talked about that. Let's see. So there's basically three different types of FMEA. By the way, this is constantly evolving. So as I say three, I know that there's a fourth one out there, the three biggies are, the two biggies are, the first one is a product or service. So it's going to identify in a product or service where what can go wrong with the product or what could go wrong with the service. For example, a risk in selling insurance, if you're selling insurance, a risk is that the person who buys it will make a claim. Now, that's a risk that insurance companies should want to make. In fact, when I went to insurance selling school in property and casualty, I bet you didn't know that, but I did, and became a licensed insurance agent in Massachusetts. That was the person who did the intro asked everybody, are claims good or are claims bad? And 90% of the class said claims are bad, are bad, including me. And that person corrected us on our thinking. Saying, no, claims are good. If nobody made claims, insurance would be useless. So that's an interesting thing to think about. However, having said that, we need to go in and understand what the risk is there, and we have professional actuaries to do that if you're an insurance company. But in many products and services, like with a bathtub, you have to worry about the risk of, say, slippage, or if you're making a blender, you have to worry about the risk of the top coming off, like it does in every movie scene when they have a blender. Things like that. Then there's a process FMEA, where we're talking about specific places in a process where different things can happen. So, for example, a risk in a process might be that information isn't transferred between one place or another. I think, for example, in the quoting example, one of the risks that we had, I'm watching proprietary stuff here, was in looking up certain characteristic codes of a business, that we may look up the wrong characteristic codes. I think they're called SIC codes. And so, that's actually a rather obvious risk. So a process would need to have something to help mitigate that risk. If we're talking about a discharge process in a hospital, maybe you'd be talking about the risk of that the patient actually gives you incorrect information when you register. And then finally, the project FMEA identifies priorities and what can go wrong in a project. So you can use it in a lot of different places. Now, there's a template, and I'll show you what the template looks like. And we'll walk through an example of the template. But here, let me show you what an FMEA looks like, so that you see it. And this is the template that I've given you. So the template that I've given you in an FMEA basically reads from left to right. And this one would maybe be for a process FMEA, which is the more common one when we're doing process improvements. And this would be the process step. So this would be, say, any process step you'd enter over there, and basically you'd enter in your process, whatever that process step is over there. The next thing you'd enter in is sort of what is the mode of failure. So let me do an example. Well, we'll do an example in just a moment, and we'll walk through it. On the right-hand side, you're essentially assessing the risk of the as-is process. And on the right-hand side, that's for filling out later after you make improvements, and you'll hopefully show that there's a before and after effect. Ultimately, you're scoring things in an FMEA on 3 different things, and I'll highlight them here in maybe blue. How about blue? Severity, how severe the risk is, how likely it is to occur, and the third one's called detection. I never liked that phraseology. I like the phraseology of saying how much control do we have over that particular risk. So those are the three items that we have there, and basically each one of them is a scale. So if you say, let's say it's a 1 to 10 scale. So for example, if I have something, forget about how we get these numbers here for a moment, but if I have something that's a 3 on the severity scale, and a risk of occurrence, probability of occurrence is a 6, and detection is a 10, that has a total risk of 180. And if I have another item that is, say, very severe, but unlikely to occur, and we have it in good control, or fairly good control, then that scores an 18, and we know that item number 1 is riskier than item number 2. Now, how we get that, and for an example, is what I wanted to show you as we move forward. But this RPN is sort of the combined score of the 3 aspects of every risk that we identify. So every risk has 3 aspects: how severe it is, how likely to occur, and how well do we know that it's going to occur, and what control over mitigating it do we have.
So, Mark, on the detection piece, how well we know if it'll occur or not, is that the less we know, the higher the ranking?
Yes, yes. So that's an interesting thing. So this 10 right here would mean we cannot detect this particular risk, whatever it is. I'll just write it in here. Like this is, say, a hurricane comes out of no, no, maybe not a hurricane. This is a, I don't know. We'll do it when we have the process, but I think you got it right. Is that this 10 means that we can't detect it. That this is going, if it hits us out of nowhere, and we never know. That's what that 10 means. The 2 here means that we have, we measure it daily, we have a good monitor on it, and it's pretty well in control. We have a lot of controls in place to make sure it doesn't happen. Or when it does, we know about it. That answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. Now, also in the template, there are scales for like how severe it is, how likely to occur it is, and detection. But I'll go through that as we go through the example that's in here, and show you how it works. So these are just definitions of the various items, which you can go through and read later. And yes, and here's basically what the scales are when we score things on the severity, occurrence, and detection. On the top end of the scale, on the high, 10 is highest, and usually 1 is lowest. If you want to use a 1 to 5, be my guest. Not a problem. Go ahead and do it. The important thing is to have the team to agree on it. On the top, it's basically the severity is it's hazardous, and it can happen without warning. You know what? You can just say it's hazardous or extremely costly, something like that. On the top of the occurrence scale, it's very likely to occur. And on the high on the detection scale is I cannot detect it, or I detect it with an extremely low probability of ever seeing it. In the middle, we've got things like severity would be loss of a secondary function. So, for example, if I'm booking a hotel room, the loss of the customer completely would be, for the company, would be very severe. Like if I'm booking on Marriott.com and the site crashes, that would be very severe. But if I can't see that it has a hair dryer, that might not be, that might rate a much lower, if I can't see an amenities page, that may be less critical than if the whole site crashes. On occurrence, it means that it happens a moderate amount of time, maybe like 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000, whereas this is, once out of every 2 or once out of every 3. And on detection, I'm having a hard time seeing it, but it's not terrible. I can see it once in a while, like maybe half the time I can see it. And on the bottom of the severity scale is basically it's not severe at all. If it happens, the customer may not even notice, or if they do, they don't even care. That would be maybe a 1 or a 2. On occurrence, it's a 1 or a 2 would mean almost never happens. And on detection, it means that when it does happen, we're going to see it. We always see it. Now, just to keep in mind that, in my opinion, if you're doing FMEA and people are not getting the detection, get rid of it. Don't worry about it, and just score it on severity and occurrence. And the reason why is there's a lot of risks where detection, it's sort of like, if we detect it, so what? We can't prevent the risk anyway. Like say, a risk of a hurricane if you're living in South Florida. Well, you might be able to do some things to mitigate that risk, like evacuate if you can detect it early, but chances are you're not going to stop the hurricane. So, in a lot of cases, we want to focus on the first couple rather than the third. The other way to think about it is, instead of calling it detection, call it level of control, and that might help you facilitate it. Certainly with the financial guys, measurement means control, so that probably works well with them. All right, let's go through an example of sort of when you want to use an FMEA. So one of the things with FMEA is you don't want to start out using it. It's not a first tool. Just like DOE, you want to make sure that you would do a process map beforehand and probably a fishbone diagram, and maybe even an input-output diagram for that particular process step. like a SIPOC or something like that. If for Shani and Sue, you'll note that we didn't do any FMEAs until we had the SIPOC-Ts done. And the SIPOC-Ts formed a good basis for being able to do that FMEA. All right, so and usually it's done at not the highest level, but usually a level 2 or level 3 process map. So this is basically where you'd want to maybe have the FMEA. So for example, we're going to do a pizza shop example. And in that pizza shop example, there is a, suppose that there's the VOC is I want it fast, and a CTQ might be I want it ordered to delivery within 30 minutes. High level, the process might be I acquire the order, I communicate it to the kitchen, I construct and cook the pizza, I relay it to the driver, and then I deliver it. It may not be me doing that. And we're talking about maybe the drill down under acquiring the customer orders. The customer calls, and now maybe the rep records the screen, the order. That might be where you want to do an FMEA, because you've got a reasonable process map with enough steps, but not 80 steps. An 80-step FMEA is going to get you in trouble because you're going to generate 300 or 400 risks. You don't want to do that. You want to keep it to, say, 40 or less, rule of thumb, because then you can do something about it, and then you can manage it reasonably. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do show you what the FMEA might look like for a process, for this particular process. Okay, so let's just walk through the process really quickly. The rep greets the customer, suggests specials, whether it's delivery or not. If it's delivery, you begin the takeout. The customer provides the name of the address, and they verify. The customer provides a payment info. The customer provides the order, and the rep reviews the order with the customer and updates. So that's what we're going to be building the FMEA for. Okay, here's what an input-output diagram looks like. It looks just like our SIPOC, right? Without the S and without the C. It looks like the box that we always draw. That's what we're talking about. Okay, so what are the key inputs and what are the key outputs of this process? Key outputs are screen customer, screen food, type of payment, and redirection appropriately. If it's to takeout, takeout. If it's to the shop, the cook, that's got to happen correctly too. Some inputs are the customer order, the info, the customer info, the call, the phone, pizza rep, customer, and the screening parameters, whatever those are. So those are the things that can kind of go wrong. An input-output diagram like this is essential for being able to do the FMEA. And this is even more so a cause and effect diagram. So this kind of tells sort of what what can happen along the way. To me, as long as you have this this input-output and the process map, you're probably good to go on the FMEA. Okay, so the first thing is to kind of fill out the header. Not going to spend any time doing that, but do fill out the header. That's what this is. The next thing is to kind of go through the process. Okay, so as we cover this, you start by listing the process steps. So, for example, the rep greets the customer and suggests the specials, and the customer specifies delivery or pickup. Okay. So if we're going to do that, the next thing that we'll do is we'll list the potential failure modes. So, for example, and there can be more than one for each process step. So the way it's written is just as one, but it could certainly be more than one. So when the rep is greeting the customer, the rep could forget to ask, hey, is it delivery or pickup? That would be a mistake, and that would be a failure mode. But there could be other things that are there, like the phone could catastrophically hang up if you're using a cell phone, for example. The phone could lose the connection. Okay. And then we want to talk about what the effects are of that particular failure. So again, I'm just listing a couple, but we could list more. So for example, the effects might be the customer is not screened properly. So if I forget to ask for delivery, that might annoy the customer, and it might help make their perception that we're unprofessional. Okay, and if the customer mistakenly asks for the wrong option, like if they say, oh, I want delivery, but they really want pickup, or I want pickup and they really want delivery, there could be a real delay in the pizza delivery here. Okay, so the effects are different of these different things. So the next thing would be to talk about the severity. Once you have the effects, you can talk about the severity of those effects. Okay? And again, hopefully, if you're still in the process, I guess I would ask you, in the example that we're doing here now, let me call this failure mode 1 and failure effect 1. And so this is 1.1, keeping in mind that you could have 1.2, 1.3, and this is 2, and this is 2.1. So just a poll. What would you think is the more severe of these two failures? 1.1 or 1.2? Okay. Let me ask somebody specifically. So, Sue, I'm going to put you on the spot. Which one of these two would you think would be more severe?
Mark, do you mean 1.1 or 2.1? Or
Yeah. Oh, yes. 1.1 or 2.1. Yes.
Hold on. Let me look at this really quick. Delivery. I would say 2.1.
2.1, absolutely. So in the first one, they're maybe a little bit annoyed, but in the second one, they don't get their pizza. So, thinking about what the reason for this process is, so whatever that gets, what that ends up getting, whether that gets to be a 6 or whatever, we know that this one's going to probably be lower, maybe a 3 or even a 2. Okay, so that's sort of the thinking that you want to bring into here. We'll score this at the end, but I'm just trying to do it as we're going along. Okay, so now the question is, what could be the cause of this sort of thing? So there's a line for what are the potential causes for this, and so you and your team would want to list things like, for example, maybe the rep is distracted, or maybe the rep forgets, or maybe the rep was not trained. Anyway, those are all different potential causes. Okay. In the second one, it says customer is not screened properly. They mistakenly asked for the wrong option. In the example here, it says human error. Now, I hate that. I hate when people just list human error. I'd like to understand why people made problems. So do your best to get beyond human error. I shouldn't have put that in here, so that's a slap on my wrist for that. But the potential causes are going to help you understand what are the occurrence, the likelihood of occurrence of this. So depending on your process as it exists right now, either of these could vary. Like if you run a shop where there's lots of other things going on, that might be very high, like maybe a 6 or a 7. But on the other hand, if you run a shop where the person who's taking the order, that's all they do, and they have a screen in front of them and a reminder button that says, make sure you ask for delivery or pickup, maybe it's a 2. So that really depends on your process and the specifics of your process. And the same with this one, right? Okay, then finally, you want to list what are the current controls that you have for this particular error. So, for example, in this particular process, there happen to be no controls. So, again, this varies on how your process really acts right now. So there are no particular controls. So that would usually mean that you have a detection of 10. Here there is a control, and it's that the pizza rep repeats the instructions back to the customer. So if the customer says, well, I want a cheese and onion and olive pizza, large, and I want it for pickup, and the pizza rep says, okay, so you want a large cheese and onion and olive pizza, and you want it for pickup, and the guy says, no, 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 I want it for delivery, well, they've caught that error. So that would tend to say that, the detection is going to be better, in other words, lower for for 2.1 than for 1.2, 1.1. Okay, so that's all that this is shown out. That once we have all these things, we can fill out the 2s and the 3s and the 8s and so forth. And it's a relative scale, but you can use some of those absolute examples that we had before. Those are then multiplied together to give you a total RPN, and at the end, you essentially simply rank the risks, and then you start looking at which ones are the biggest risks, and you say, what can we do about them? That's basically how an FMEA works. That's it. No more, no less. And let me show you. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to say, what questions do you have? You'll notice that we've covered these right here. That's what we've walked through. And what we still have to do are over here, which is, okay, what do we want to do about it? Maybe with this risk, with this one, it's nothing. We don't want to do anything about it. But maybe this one is, I don't know what it is. Design, callback strategy, callback procedure. Okay, and who's responsible for it? Shani. Not to put more on your plate, Shani, etc. Okay, so this is the before, this is the as is, and this is the to be. Okay, and when you finish this, of course, then it becomes a living document, and the to be comes back over here. That's it. All right, so that's the FMEA as it is. I guess I'll ask you sort of what questions do you have at the moment about this?
I'm good, Mark.
Okay. All right. So so I want to show you something. Now I want to talk a little bit about just some practical things in using an FMEA. And well, maybe I'll ask you guys, since we're not doing it right now, what would be your inclination about where are the pitfalls here, or where may be some pitfalls?
Can you, seems to me like you could possibly unlean a process, if that makes sense. Like you just, I mean, I realize you're trying to catch errors, but it seems you have the potential of maybe overcooking it a little bit and adding too many controls on the back end to prevent something that may be, you know, I don't know if that does not need to be prevented, but you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. And what I would say is that if you're doing it right, that the goal should be that it should actually do the opposite, because it should focus you on the risks that are, it should say very clearly, here's the stuff that really matters, and here's the stuff that doesn't. And you know what? We don't need to control or over-control the stuff that there's really not a lot of risk for.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, it's hard to get to that point. So let me share with you a couple of things that are difficult with the FMEA. Number one, this is a very intimidating spreadsheet for most people, to throw it up here and to just talk about it. So some advice that I can give you is draw on a poster, if you can, or make sure that you walk through, not this stuff, but draw on a poster the process map of what you're talking about. So in this case, it would be, you know, this process right here. Oh, I'm having trouble going back and forth. You probably want to draw this on a map and then have that displayed for everybody to remind them, this is what we're talking about. And then probably also, you'd want to have a similar thing with this. You'd probably want to also show this and review this with people to understand, oh yeah, it's these inputs. These are the things that can kind of make things go wrong and why. Like, for example, in the call, oh yeah, well, the phone, the pizza rep could pick up the phone and the phone could blow up. Okay, yeah, let's list that, but guess what? That's going to go to the bottom because maybe it's severe, but likelihood of occurrence, 0. Would be detected 100% of the time. That becomes a very low risk. But it's good at jogging sort of your memory about it. Okay? So that's one thing. It can be very intimidating. And I find also that the pitfall that Patrick brought up unknowingly, but he brought it up, and that is that detection in particular, if something is undetected or has low possibility of detection, there's just a want, you always want to make that low. You always want to give that a 1 or a 2, and it doesn't work that way. It's the opposite. So there's some do's and don'ts that I give on one of the pages. Let me see if I can get to it. 55. On slide 55. So here are some do's. Make sure that you are using FMEA only on a specific part of the process. If you have it super broad, you're going to have so many risks, you're never going to finish. Okay? Do create your own RPN scales. If people don't like that 0 to 10, use a 0 to 5 or 1 to 5 or a 1 to 3 even. You know what? It'll help a lot because understanding risks and putting them into context is very helpful. I'm going to tell you a true story. It's absolutely true story. I have a sister, love her. You can see what's coming. There's a but here, right? So I love her. She had a great job when she was younger. She was international flight attendant. She loved it. She's great with languages. She speaks 4 languages fluently. And it was wonderful for her. The problem was, in the end, she quit the job because she was afraid of flying across the Atlantic. Now, that's not a totally unreasonable fear, but the reason she was afraid of it was because of the risk, now this is my language, that the plane would crash and she would get eaten by a shark. It's not a joke, okay? So the question is, should you, it's almost like in the Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, if you've ever seen that movie, where Butch and Sundance are standing by the cliff and they're getting ready to jump off this cliff into the stream below, the only way that they can escape. And I think it's Sundance says he doesn't want to do it, and Butch says, why? And he says, because I can't swim. He says, are you crazy? The fall's going to kill you. And that's kind of the point, is that a lot of times we tend to react very much on one aspect of a risk and not at the other. And so looking at the severity and the likelihood of occurrence can be helpful. Severity of a shark attack, very severe, no question about it. But the likelihood of a shark attack, extremely, extremely low compared to, say, drowning or swallowing water or being hurt or killed by the impact of the seat against your head when you crash. So create your own scales. Take time to review it. Make sure that you use the other tools as inputs, the FMEA. And you can update it later. FMEAs should be living documents, and detail and data will grow over time, and that's okay. And that's why we want to get them into control plans if we can. Don't spend a lot of time arguing over whether it should be a 5 or a 6. I'll have more on that to say, more to say on that in probably a half hour. Don't try building an FMEA alone in your office. Can't be done. You need team input on this. And just take a little bit of time to train the team on that. If you need to just put it on a flip chart, and the flip chart looks like this, here's actually, I think, a reasonable way to do an FMEA is to just do a flip chart on a flip chart, and you can say things like, right here, process step, and then say, what are the risks? And just list the risks. How severe are they? How likely are they to occur? And what are the controls we currently have? And then in the end, do your RPN, which stands for risk priority number, by the way. And that ought to be enough, right? If you want to do that on a flip chart, that's fine with me. And you know what? It's going to be a good FMEA. You don't have to go through that whole, and now we do this, and now we do the failure modes. It works. It works. Let me also show you, and I can provide this to you. I may have to do a little bit of sanitizing of it. But I want to show you a at least one of you will recognize this, a simplified version of FMEA that I simply call the risk table. And it's essentially a short form of FMEA. And here it is right here. So it's a little bit easier to read. The process step lists some key outputs, and then just put the risks right in there, and what the effects of the risks are, and then how severe it is, why it could happen, and how likely it is to happen. What's the probability? And you'll notice there's no calculation at all for controls or detection. It's just left out, and you get a risk score. And in the end, you know, people are, and maybe list the control methods over here. In the end, then people get something that is a little bit more amenable to them for reading. And I'm going to show very brief amount. This happens to be for one that I'm sure somebody has seen. So this is in creating rates for, say, insurance. It's no surprise to anybody if you're an employer that if you're employed in let's say you're a cabinet maker, that you're going to pay higher insurance rates than say if you just have office workers. So that's done by SIC codes. What if the wrong SIC codes get in there? Well, we'll calculate the rates incorrectly. That's got a pretty high severity. What could cause the failure? Well, we get a wrong SIC code, or the sales inputs it incorrectly. They type it, they fat finger it wrong into a program, and so forth. What's the likelihood of that? Well, pretty small. And here's what the risk score is. And what are our control methods? Well, we're going to have some things that we're going to do in our design. So the control methods then help us understand what we're doing with those risks. And that's all. Okay. So if you'd like to, I need a little bit more sanitizing to do on this one. But if you'd like this one, I'd be happy to send it to you as well. It's a little bit easier to navigate this one. But I also wholeheartedly endorse using simply a flip chart to do this. And then you probably want to use the sticky notes on this so that people can change these if they need to. Okay? So questions or comments?
I'm good, Mark.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. One last thing before we move on. There is an exercise, and this is in your assignment. And in this exercise, you're going to be doing a project FMEA. This is for a projector. You can think of it as a projector for a PC. Like, I'm trying to remember what you guys call projectors at Connecticut. What do you guys call those that are in the training rooms? They're on the ceiling.
Projectors.
They're on the ceilings. What do you call them?
I think projectors.
No, you don't call them that. You call them the IBEX or something like that.
Oh, that's not it. I don't know. Shanny walked away. I don't use them in the training room, so I'm sorry.
Okay, the things that are on the
ceiling.
ceiling.
No.
What's that?
I know what you're talking about because they're hanging from the ceiling, but I call them projectors.
Okay, nobody else does. Oh dang, it's on the tip of my tongue.
I know,
anyway.
I know what you're talking about, but
yeah.
the
Okay.
word's not coming to me
When
right
she
now.
comes in, she'll have to say.
Yeah.
All right.
She will. Proxima.
Proxima. Yeah, that's it. Proxima. Okay. All right. So there's an exercise for this, and basically you're given the input-output diagram. There's no process map for this, and you're given a fishbone diagram for low bulb brightness. So you want to you'll essentially want to look at the key outputs of a projector has a bright light, the projector is quiet, and the colors are correct. Don't build an FMEA that's got 50 or 60 entries. Build one that's got 10 and you're good. Okay? All right. So that's FMEA, and it's a good tool. It's a pretty good tool. I like the FMEA a lot. So if there are no questions on this, I want to move into decision making. And I think what I'm going to have to do is post a video on Decision Guru, and it's no longer trademarked; it's now registered. So I've got to change that as well because it's patented now. But instead, what I want to do is just kind of give you an introduction to decision-making thinking and all that. And the backdrop is basically cognition. And so, decision-making is part of a broader topic called cognition. And all this stuff is all the rage now, particularly after the financial crisis. But most of it is in an area called behavioral economics. If you go to the marketing group or any marketing group across the country, sales group, and an increasing number of PMOs are now talking about this. And what it amounts to is that the old models of economics, which were Keynesian, based on rationality, and that people will make choices that benefit them on an expected that are expected to benefit them, are simply false. That we make decisions all the time for reasons which we're not even aware of, and it causes us to make bad decisions. We saw in ABC analysis that a lot of our behaviors are dependent on a few things, whether we know it or not. Not on rationality, but on whether something is positive or negative, whether it's immediate or whether it will happen in the future, or whether it's certain. So something that's immediate and certain is much more likely to influence our behavior than something that is in the future and uncertain. And all that might be obvious, but this was not obvious to most people for a long time. And I think the real question is sort of like, not the real question, but the real issue is, because of this, we make suboptimal decisions all of the time. So I want to start out, at least in this one, by talking about or by asking people who are on the phone, what decisions do you make on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? So take 15 seconds and let's see if we can come up with a short list.
Mark, what are we doing?
So take 15 seconds and just write down, what are some decisions that you make on a daily or weekly or monthly basis? What are decisions that you make? Okay, so let's write down. Let's just capture some of those decisions. So let's just kind of go round robin. So let's start with Sue. So what are some of the decisions that you make on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
Whether or not I'm going to exercise.
Okay.
That was mine.
Well, exercise. I made the right choice this morning. Okay, got it.
I did not.
Okay, well, I won't chide you for it.
That's okay.
All right, Patrick?
Mine was going to follow that, and should I have that second serving of dessert?
Okay, second serving of dessert. I got it.
I also have what time I should leave for work.
Okay, time to leave for work. Okay, got it. So, you guys are capturing. And so, without being too prescriptive about this whole thing, is that you guys are already way ahead of the curve. So, when I talk to a lot of people, and they come up with a blank stare, well, and which often amounts to saying, "I don't make any decisions in my life," which is a patently false statement to make. We make tons of little decisions constantly. The fact that I got up in the morning right, is in and of itself a decision. And it, as trivial as that sounds, you know, whether I were independently wealthy or not might really influence that decision. No offense to anybody on the line. I love what I'm doing here today, but I may not be quite as motivated to get up and do it if, you know, if I were a billionaire. Or much less. So there's lots of stuff there. Now let's take 15 seconds, and you may not need it, but let's take 15 seconds and talk about what business decisions do you make? Again, daily, monthly, weekly. Okay, now let's talk about them a little bit. So Sue, what's one that you came up with, a business decision that you make?
What the priorities are for the day to get accomplished.
Okay, so daily priorities, good. Okay, Patrick?
For us, it's, you know, what projects are we going to take on and what are we going to pass on?
What projects to run? Good, okay. Sue, do you have another one?
What meetings I'm going to attend or decline.
Okay.
Shanny's back, by the way.
Well,
Okay.
she took mine.
Okay, Shanny.
She took mine. Let's see. I would think whether or not I'm gonna pursue a problem that I'm seeing. I guess like when I identify something, whether or not it's something that I should do something about or not.
Okay, got it. Got it. Okay, so I'm going to make a sweeping generalization here, and what I'll say is there are basically two types of decisions that we make. Boy, categorizing things into two types, that's a new one, right? I know nobody ever likes this joke, but I used to have a friend who used to say this. I just think it's hilarious. And he used to say there are two types of people in the world: those that categorize people into two types and those that don't. I don't know. I don't know why I find that funny, but I just do. All right, but there are two types of decisions. I know I can tell from your laughter you find it hilarious. Anyway, there are two types of decisions: milestone decisions. And what Patrick has described is more of a milestone decision. If we choose the wrong project to fund, that could have massive implications, right? Or if we go with a certain configuration of our emergency room, whether than another configuration, that could have massive implications. If we hire somebody who isn't a good fit, that could have massive implications for our business. If we go to the wrong college, that's massive, right? If we launch a new product that's the wrong product to launch, those are milestone decisions. So those have big severity. Going to FMEA, big severity, but they don't happen that often. So you either win or lose big. And then there's what I would say are everyday, maybe that's not the right word, but everyday decisions where, and these are things that you just talked about, my daily priorities, what projects to run, and going back to the personal decisions, whether I eat at McDonald's or not, right? So where I go to lunch, yeah, I probably won't want to use a long, week-long process to decide, where I go to lunch. But if you think about it, if I make that wrong decision on a day-to-day basis and I go to McDonald's, say, every day, I'm probably going to regret that, as many teens do with diabetes today. Sad statement. But also, there are many things in our business that are like that. The sales processes are very much like that. It's a game of inches. So here, it's sort of the repeat. And if we can make a 1% or a 5% improvement on our decision, that's huge, right? Because over time, if we make thousands of these decisions in a year, we're going to be righter more often than people are. On any one decision, it's raising the probability of being correct 1 to 5%. But on the totality, what does that mean over the course of a year? It means a lot. So having a decision-making process, as we'll find out, is going to be an important part of making that improvement, whether it happens all at once, when you have a big potential losses like this, where you really are looking for a 20% better decision, taking a lot of risk out of it in that one, or 1 or 5% better on the other. So there's that. I wanted to comment on this. I guess I will in just a moment. But let's kind of go back to this. Yes. So I mentioned I've got two references there. There's a lot of good books that are out there now. Two of the best are written by Dan Ariely, who's an Israeli psychologist, and Dan Kahneman, who's a Nobel laureate, along with Amos Tversky, who's now dead, unfortunately. They were the ones who started it. There's a fantastic book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And it really kind of describes how basically our brain has two different modes of operation, and it's really using the quick mode, using the fast mode, when we make decisions over and over that gets us into trouble, and essentially talks about different strategies to overcome that. There are two additional books, and I'll write them up, that I think that you would enjoy, and these are very accessible books, by the way. And I'll write one that's very, I'll write two, and one of them is, oh gosh. This one is extremely accessible. It's not my favorite, but it's extremely accessible, and it's called Sway. You might want to try that. It's a bestseller. And another one that's a little bit less, but I know, for example, Terry has a copy of this, and it's called, where is it? It's called Winning Decisions. I don't know the author of Sway, but Winning Decisions is Jay Russo, and who's at Cornell, that's how I know it, and Shoemaker. And we'll at the end of the talk here, when I show you a few things, we'll talk about some of their rules that are there, that are in that book. And these are really eye-opening books. Winning Decisions is really more of a, this is more for an MBA type book. So it's a little bit heavier read. The others are pretty easy to read and give lots of great examples of all the different cognitive biases that we'll talk about in 2 minutes from now. So I wanted to mention that. And one of the things that they found out is that, particularly in thinking fast and slow, is that now going with what I was talking about before, or to one of you before, we altogether often use our automatic thinking to make decisions instead of using, and that can be very irrational. There's no rationality to it. It's based on instinct and all that, and that can get us into trouble. And just to give you an example, because and we're bred with these things in our brains. We're biologically programmed to be able to react a lot of times when we shouldn't. And I'm going to give you an example. It is not a proof. I want to be clear on this. It's not a proof of evolution, nor is it a proof of what I'm going to posit. And it's ironic because it uses something. I'm using something called confirmation bias right here to convince you something. But consider this. Our brains, consider it that you were walking in the woods and you looked up and you saw a tiger. What would you do? If you're like anybody in the world today, you'd run, or you'd try and climb a tree, or you'd try and get away, right? Here's what you wouldn't do. You wouldn't say, let me think about this rationally. The chances that that tiger is hungry is based upon whether or not the last time he ate, and also his food preferences. So let me scan around here and see if there's anything that that tiger has eaten yet. Let me maybe look at the size of the tiger and the stomach and whether or not there are any pigs around. And whoa, by then I'm eaten by the tiger, right? So the people who were rational about being eaten by a tiger problem were all eaten, and they didn't pass on their genes. So they don't exist today. All right. The rest of us have irrational brains because we ran away, or our ancestors ran away. Now that's not a proof or anything like that. It's just an argument that says, you know, it could be that mechanism. A man named Daniel Dennett, who's a natural philosopher, talks of essentially 3 different ways that we do make those types of decisions. All right. So, having said that, today's business world requires us not to make those instant thoughts. Altogether, too often, we have to stop, we have to think, we have to be rational about things. But our brains are not built to do that. So we're going to have a mechanism that says, wait, stop, do this in the way that we want to do it, or in a rational way. Okay, what I want to do is I want to give you an example of, I want to just list some, by the way, you can read the different decisions. We talked about some of these, but there certainly are personal and business decisions, and you can see the big and small ones that are given on slide 64. Personal decisions of what career path should I take, or where should I live, where should my child go to college. Those are all things that you want to make rational decisions on. And there's lots of business decisions as well. Which job candidate should I hire? Which IT project should I select? Should we acquire another business? Should we make a large investment in emergency care or ambulatory care? Should we manage, how should we manage patient and physician complaints or complaints from our members? All those sorts of things. Okay, so I'm just going to move forward a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about, yes, this is all very interesting, Mark. It is kind of a cool little demonstration, but we'll have some of this on here. What we want to be able to do is essentially make high quality decisions, and we want to be able to make them quickly. And to do that, we're going to have a process. And okay, sorry about that, guys. I want to list, just to give you an idea of what's out there. Here is a set of the biases that researchers have uncovered. This comes from Newberg and Waldman, who are doctors, in the 2006 book. But there's all these different biases that we suffer from. Cognitive biases, from authoritarian bias, that is respecting authorities more than we should. Attractiveness bias, we tend to believe things that Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie say rather than other people who are perhaps not as attractive. There's group consensus bias. We talked about groupthink. There's probability bias, or gambler's fallacy. If I've played this game so many times and I haven't won yet, I'm due, that sort of thing. Without going through all these biases, by the way, I'd be happy to provide you with a list of what all these mean. And it's fun to look into it. It's actually rather obvious that there's a lot of proponents who say we need to train with biases. Well, I argue that's such a losing battle, because how can I train myself to say, okay, now I'm going to make a decision. Let me think about these 27 different biases that I've got and see if I'm carrying around those in this decision. I mean, it would grind you to a halt of being able to do anything. So we need to think about how we're going to handle that. And I'm going to cut to the chase. And even though there's lots of other great stuff in the book here, what I wanted to do was actually go to a, that's the right one. There we go. Is to actually go through what are Russo's rules. So Jay Russo, one of the writers in there, said, here are the rules to be able to be an effective decision maker. Not that. Here are some rules to be an effective decision maker, and if you want to get better at it, and you want to be a good decision maker, here are the things that you need to be able to do. Number one, have a flexible decision-making process. it needs to be flexible because decision making is fairly complex, especially large decisions are pretty complex. Number 2, practice it. Use the process and practice using the process, and when you make a decision, try and go back and see, did you follow that step? The third thing is record and review your decisions. So altogether, too often, one of the key biases that every one of us carries around is hindsight bias. That is, once something happens, we say it's obvious. A great example of that is Jamie Dimon recently in their $2 billion loss. He said at the end, yeah, we had this loss, but we just screwed up on that one time. No, that decision was made because there were a lot of process checks that weren't in place, and it went down the line. They didn't have a process that supported making good decisions on that. It's very likely that will be a repeated error, even if they do fire the people that are responsible for it. So we need to record our decisions and remember why we made those decisions in the time and place where we made them, not in hindsight, because in hindsight everything is obvious. And then we need to adapt our decision-making process if we can. And finally, spread the word. So the more people that we can involve in making decisions and explaining why we made them and doing it in a powerful way, the better it's going to be, and companies make better decisions every day with that. So those are kind of the rules. The punchline is that you guys now have a tool, and I want to show it to you just very briefly, and it's called Decision Guru, that you can use to have a very flexible decision-making process. And when you use it, it automatically makes you record it. So you can save your decisions, and it's built on a collaborative platform so that other people can also view how you made your decisions as well. Again, I want to just very quickly do this. That bar was gone there. Okay, so in the where I was showing you before, the platform right here, all you need to do is click on Decision Guru, and it actually walks you through a decision-making process, and allows you to frame your decision, to weight criteria, to score it, and then to do all sorts of stress testing on your decisions, and then to pick a decision, understanding your risks and all that. Clearly, we're going to run out of time on this, so I'm going to make a video doing this. Everybody who is enrolled in the course, and particularly the Connecticut folks, I'm actually in the process of putting together training where I'm going to come out there. You've already paid for it, so it's already going to happen. And you're going to get trained on the tool. But for everybody who's in the course, you're going to get some free live training on the tool as well. So that's going to happen. But I will post a video doing 1 or 2 examples of this, hopefully that's relatively lucid, and showing how it's not only a flexible process, but there are a lot of tools in the tool that will help allow you to eliminate all of those different biases that we talked about, and to really understand your risks very deeply. And it's very simple. It's not as simple as 1, 2, 3. I guess it's as simple as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, walking through the steps. All right. Like I said, I will cover that. What I wanted to show you instead was I want to go through, because maybe some of you are not feeling that that this cognitive bias stuff. Most people have a reaction like, well, this isn't me. Everybody else is biased, but yeah, I can understand how people made those decisions, but those biases, they don't really apply to me. And this just gives you an example. I just want to go through a few examples of sort of a general place where we can have some biases. For example, consider Steve. And I'm going to read the description of Steve, and you may have seen this one before, but suppose that there's a person named Steve, and this is his description. Steve is very shy and withdrawn, invariably helpful, but with little interest in people or in the world of reality. A meek and tidy soul, he has a need for order and structure and a passion for detail. So I want you to think for a second and tell me what profession do you think Steve is? Accountant.
That's what I said. That's what I thought. Accountant.
Accountant. Okay. How about this? Now, how about this? If you were posed with the question, is Steve more likely to be a librarian or a farmer, how would you answer?
Librarian.
Librarian.
Mm-hmm. Most people would say librarian, but in fact, the likelihood that there are farmers who are meek and tidy is much higher. And the reason is very simple. There are many, 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 many more times the number of farmers than the number of librarians. So this is an example, actually taken from Kahneman, of how our thinking and our heuristics can lead us astray. The likelihood that Steve is a librarian is actually pretty small compared to whether Steve is a farmer, simply because there are many, many, many more farmers. In fact, there is a saying that people used to say, something like, there are more old drunks than there are old doctors. So what does that tell you about drinking? Well, it tells you more people drink than go to medical school, and that's about it. But that's not how our brain works. Here's another example. Consider the letter K. Is K more likely to appear as the first letter in an English language word or the third letter? Think about that for 10 seconds. Okay, what do you think?
Third.
I said third because I have trouble with K's when I'm playing Scrabble.
Okay. So you guys,
rake.
What's that?
Lake, cake, rake, all those.
Exactly. And all I know is K-A, for goodness sakes. Ka. That's it. K-A. I don't know what it means, but it's a two-letter Scrabble word.
Okay, there you go. Well, it's interesting that it is indeed the third letter, but you guys are an anomaly, and if you ask 100 people, almost, I won't say almost everybody, but a very large proportion of people say the first letter. And the point is usually that people can think of K words more easily, of words that begin with the letter K than that have the third letter. But it's interesting, though, that once you get on that cake, lake, rake, bake, take, boy, that's easy to just keep generating them, isn't it? Sake, but that's an interesting one. All right, consider this one. Consider a disease threat. And suppose it's known that, now this is a big supposition, but suppose that we know that if we take Plan A, 400 people will die if we adopt Plan A. Or if we adopt Plan B, there's a 2/3 chance that 600 will die and a 1/3 chance that nobody will die. What plan would you enact?
You got to go with B.
So without putting anybody on the spot, that's pretty much what a large proportion of people say, that you go with B. Okay? So that's the preferred choice. Now I want you to consider disease threat number 2. Suppose it is known that, again, it's known, there's a big supposition, that if we enact Plan A, we will save 200 people if we adopt. And if we adopt Plan B, there's a 1/3 chance that 600 people will be saved, but a 2/3 chance that nobody will be saved. Which plan do you adopt?
Okay, Mark, but see, it's all in how it's written.
Yes.
Yeah, the last one I was thinking that 2/3 of the people
statistic,
die, not 2/3
that is how it's
everyone would
posed.
die. Yeah.
Right. So the interesting thing is that these are actually exactly the same. These are exactly the same. But most people will say Plan B is what you adopt here, and Plan A is what you adopt here. So we tend to be. It's very interesting. We tend to be more conservative, and we react more strongly to threats than to benefits. So it's much easier to, for example, motivate a team by using threats, but not necessarily motivate a team by using threats against them, but threats of existence. Like, and you've often heard this with company initiatives, that if you can create a burning platform, oh my gosh, you know, the healthcare industry, we are going to sink if we just can't get the whole ACO paradigm down, and if we can't start to migrate to that, we're going to be out of business. But as things evolve, you want to make sure that people have an evolving look at the benefits as well, so that you can start thinking about how to save people rather than how to avoid people being, a certain amount of people being killed. But it's interesting that the frame actually does make a difference, that more people will choose Plan A here, and in the previous one, more people will choose Plan B. And when they're
Didn't Gladwell have that in one of his books about, maybe it wasn't Gladwell, maybe it was like a Freakonomics, but if you tell someone that they have a 90% chance of living, they'll do it, but if you tell them they have a 10% chance of dying, they won't.
Yeah. I mean, this comes out of all sorts of places. I mean, Gladwell is one of the people who talked about that, and a lot of business writers have written about that. I learned about it in Kahneman, but it's certainly oft repeated. But it does show you, that there's really no difference between these two, and yet it's well, there is a difference, but it's interesting how we make our choices. All right, I want to share with you this one as well. And I'm going to, instead of reading this, I want you to listen to it and read it as you go along. Does everybody see this one? A feeling of knowing, it should say. This one is actually pretty powerful, so I want you to see how your brain works. And I was really stunned by this one. So here it is right here. Think about the tension of shifts in your mental state and feeling as I read this paragraph, okay? I'm going to read it aloud. A newspaper is better than a magazine. A seashore is a better place than the street. At first, it is better to run than to walk. You may have to try several times. It takes some skill, but it is easy to learn. Even young children can enjoy it. Once successful, complications are minimal. Birds seldom get too close. Rain, however, soaks in very fast. Too many people doing the same thing can also cause problems. One needs lots of room. If there are no complications, it can be very peaceful. A rock will serve as an anchor. If things break loose from it, however, you will not get a second chance. Okay? So do you kind of get the whole gist there? Okay. Now I want to ask you a question. Is the paragraph comprehensible or meaningless? What do you think?
I didn't get much out of it.
I'm thinking it's meaningless, but
Yeah, meaningless.
all of the things string together, my brain was trying to make sense of it, but I did feel an emotion change from a happier emotion down to sort of I was a little bit sadder or depressed at the end.
Yeah.
Interesting.
How about, Sue, is Sue still there?
I am.
Sue, how do you feel about it?
I didn't really understand it, but if I read it a couple times, maybe it would come to me.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how a lot of people feel. It kind of runs a gamut from I don't get it at all to kind of the way that Sue described. When I read it the first time, my feeling was, I think something's there, but I can't figure out. I haven't figured it out. I'm frustrated. All right, so now I'm going to give you a word. Okay, you ready for the word? The word is kite. Now do you think you know what now do you think you know what it was about?
Interesting.
I knew it was a kite.
You knew it was a kite.
I did, actually. When I got to the end, I said they're talking about a kite. But at the same point, it still felt like it was all over the place.
Oh, hindsight bias. You didn't say kite.
I know I didn't, but I did. In my head, I said, it's probably about a kite.
Uh-huh.
That's because you have a hard time with the K words, remember?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
right.
that's true, because that's true. See? Starts with a K.
Oh, man, that's interesting.
Overachiever. Oh,
However.
overachieving.
So you guys agree it's about a kite. I mean, look at it.
I didn't get this. I said kite, and then I saw the first one.
All right, so now what if I told you it's not a kite? This is a collaborative poem that's written by a third grade class. and it's just snippets that are put together. How do you feel about that?
Possible too.
Manipulated?
You feel manipulated, don't you?
Yeah.
You feel now most people when they look at this, now I've run this with a large class, and let a lot of time sink in. They're like, oh, kite, yeah, oh man, it's like, oh yeah, birds seldom get close, rain soaks in. Oh yeah, it'd be really hard on the street. Rock can serve as an anchor. Yeah, it's a small rock, sure. And then when I tell them this, they argue with me and say, no, it's not. It's a kite. It's definitely a kite. And the thing is that once the brain kind of singles in on that feeling of, I know what this is about, it's very, very hard to undo it. And there's lots of examples of biases that occur because of that. So anyway, I wanted to give you a flavor of all these different biases. There's so many more. There's that whole list, and I've got examples of all. They're a lot of fun to play around, but what can we do about it is really the issue. And you know, one of the things that we can do is we can change our processes, knowing that people are irrational, knowing that people act irrationally. We can design processes not to take advantage of them, but to help make sure that we don't fall prey to those biases. You know, I am biased, in my opinion, about how Decision Guru helps avoid a lot of those things by avoiding groupthink, but by making sure that people are collaborative and not isolated, by using a process that actively looks for biases and tries to ferret them out, and by systematically showing multiple sides to or multiple criteria, multiple reasons for making a decision as opposed to just one reason. But I'm biased. I want to give you this example, and I hope this will be a good example, and you'll see that how effective using this kind of stuff can be in a process. So one of the things that this also floored me. Now this is a little bit old. This is about maybe 5 or 6 years old. But when this was first presented to me, and don't criticize the graph because I didn't do it, but I noticed you have to look sideways and there's some 3D, which I hate. But anyway, this happens to be for organ donation. So when there was a study that was done in Europe that looked at the percentage of adults who donated their organs, and you know, for after they die. Obviously, there's huge medical benefits if people do donate their organs. And so you look at it, and it's pretty obvious that there's basically two groups here, right? There's the groups that do and the groups that don't, the countries that do and the countries that don't. So I know we're over time, but if you can think for just 10 seconds, unless you already know the answer here, think for 10 seconds, what could account for this? What could account for the disparity between these countries? Any thoughts?
Is it maybe kind of in one set, it's assumed you will unless you say no, and the other one it's assumed you won't unless you say yes?
Oh man, you got it. So that's exactly what the answer is. But most people, when you show it to them, they say, well, there must be something really different about these societies, right? Maybe it's law or religion. And when you look at it longer, you see that, for example, here's Denmark down at 4.25, and here's Sweden at 85 or 86%. Those two cultures are so identical. You know, it'd be like the difference between people in Michigan and people in Ohio. You know, pretty similar, although they would say they're very different. Very, very similar in terms of their attitudes and all that, and the way that they speak. And yet, look at the difference in organ donation, and it all comes down to the default on their driver's license application. That's it. These are opt-in, these are opt-out. And that's what drives a lot of this stuff. And you might think, well, why is that driving it? Is it because that the people over here basically said, you know, I don't even want to bother. I'm so tired. I'm so lazy. I won't even lift up a pencil to make this decision. No, it's not. It's because it is a consequential decision, and if we don't, if we can't maybe get to the bottom of it, we'll just go with the default, and it can show you like how powerful these defaults are. Anyway, there's lots of other examples that I could give. I'm going to stop here. It turns out that experts make these have all these problems as well, and that a lot of times that's the issue. And being able to think through things in a systematic way and to look through the risks and all that, I think is going to really help you a lot. So I'm going to do a video on Decision Guru. I would encourage all of you to call me if you want a personal demo. I'd be happy to show it to you. Like I said, the Connecticut folks, you are going to get training. Baptist folks, I hope you will all get training as well. I know everybody in the class has training coming to them, but even if other people at the company want to get training, I'm sure we can arrange for doing that. And there's going to be hopefully more discussion later on. But so I'll post a video on it, and please do make sure that you take a look at it. I think it'll be very valuable to you. So I'm going to stop at this point, but I always have a blast talking about this stuff. Covered the remaining stuff about teams. Remember to read the Nut Island Effect, and you have a couple of exercises in there. FMEA, remember to relax. Don't inundate people with all the stuff about FMEA. You do have one exercise in there for projector, for product FMEA. You're more likely to do a process FMEA. And the last thing was decision making, and just keep in mind that our brains are not made for rationality. Our brains are made for quick and almost non-thinking decisions, and so we do have to slow down and have and deliberately do this. Have a process, record your decisions, and because the mind can play all sorts of different tricks on you. But we don't have to be pessimistic about that. We can be optimistic, because that means that we can make improvements in all the things that are out there that we just think are correct, that really are not, when we look at them rationally and deliberately. And there is an exercise in the 5th assignment on doing an example in Decision Guru, so you're going to have to do it anyway. All right, well, I thank you for your time. I will stick around for a few minutes if you have any sort of any questions. But I'm going to stop the recording at this point, and thank you and wish you an absolutely great weekend. And we'll see you on Tuesday. Have a great long weekend. See you guys.
Thanks, Mark. Have fun at the wedding.
Thanks.
Hey, Mark,
Are you done?
that last graph you have is interesting because they talk a lot in class about HIPAA and